about the New Deal. The New Deal was based on three basic principles. This was the plan of FDR. His first 100 days in office, he passed as many things as he possibly could, and Congress supported him on both sides of the fence. Hello, Congress. Hello, President. Maybe we could all get together and, kind of model this where everybody supports everybody. That's fun. Okay, so his three major parts were relief for the unemployed and hungry, recovery for agriculture, industry, commerce, and labor, reform, remedy for the weakness. So let's talk about his relief projects and a couple of things that he does. We know he was in a wheelchair. We talked about that extensively in class. The media did not know. We know that he and Eleanor do not have the best relationship, but that she is a fantastic first lady, because we love Eleanor. And so we know all of those things. We know he has the first female cabinet member, Frances Perkins, the Secretary of Labor. All right, so relief. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration, this distributed monies to states to use it in the areas most needed. It's basic charity is all it is. The Civilian Conservation Corps work relief projects to rake leaves, pick up litter, provided youth camps where they could live so they're not beating out those men who have to be sole wage earners for their family. You could get some of these young men who might be more desirable for those jobs and put them into other jobs where maybe they didn't need as much money and they could get some other useful skills. It would be necessary to provide wages that they could share with their homes, mostly geared at teens. All right, so the WPA is the big one. Socially useful work, headed by Harry Hopkins. We spent a ton of time on this. They built schools. They built sewage plants, road constructions. They were actors, entertainers, singers, teachers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The WPA was a massive program. The National Youth Administration. Young Americans particularly suffered. They provided money for schooling and work while in school. And so these programs saved many young people and also kept them off the job market. Kind of think co-op here. This group was headed up by African-American Florida resident Mary McLeod Bethune, whom I greatly adore. All right, African Americans are going to be particularly hit the hardest. Some discrimination in the New Deal programs are going to be administered. Usually that comes at the state level, not at the federal level, because FDR is going to make it illegal to discriminate in those programs. But what happens at the state, he doesn't really get a chance to monitor as much. It was used as an opportunity to promote interest. Some were appointed to important federal posts, and Miss Roosevelt was very active in rights, particularly for African Americans. Evaluation. Was the New Deal a waste or mistake of incompetence? But there was really no precedent before this. There was no trained personnel. And so they provided work and helped maintain self-respect. Recovery. Pump priming. They used money to make money. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation was an agency to administer the pump priming. Now, bank holiday. People were rushing to withdraw their money from the bank, and many had already closed. And so FDR is going to go ahead and close the banks down to keep them from going bankrupt at an unprecedented number and just try to save some of America's savings. So the Glass-Steagall Act is going to allow them to open, but what has to happen is they have to distinguish, are they an investment bank or are they just an average, everyday, regular bank? So they have to choose between the two. You're also going to eventually see the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which we love because this guarantees that our deposits, our money in the bank is going to be there, even if we're hacked, even if the bank goes down, that the FDIC is going to take care of us. We're also going to abandon the gold standard under FDR. He's going to call in gold coins and certificates and no longer redeemable on request. The RFC brought and sold gold on the world market in order to control the value of our dollar. They devalue the dollar in an effort to raise prices. It's all has to do with economics. So let's talk Agriculture Adjustment Act. The idea was how to help farmers. The farmers have been through some horrible things, including the Dust Bowl, where in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and other of those Midwestern states, the soil just blew away and they couldn't plant and their houses were covered with dust. And when I say covered with dust, not like it's so dusty, I mean like covered, like you couldn't see whole tractors, literally not making that up. And so these people are going to leave along Route 66, the Okies. They're going to head to California because they hear of work there. And because farmers could not pay their debt, they're going to pass the Farm Credit Administration, FCA, to borrow for equipment, seed, et cetera, to refinance with loans. So they need higher incomes and higher prices. So the AAA reduced supply of farm products. They would not grow as much. I told you guys about Elizabeth, my cow. They would receive subsidy not to grow. So money to support the AAA came from a tax on food processors. Processors, of course, passed that tax, that expense along to consumers. So small farmers saw less benefit. It's very bureaucratic, and it also produces scarcity in a time of want. And so it will be declared unconstitutional, parts of it anyway. The National Industrial Recovery Act and the National Recovery reactor basically is replaced by the NRA, which is very similar. So we're going to kind of group those together. The NRA was a direct attack of the problem. It was a two-measure competition replaced with cooperative trade associations. Anytime we hear the word cooperative, we think communist. So that kind of scares us. The NRA Code of Fair Practices limited production and provided for common price control and sales practices. Section 7A guaranteed workers' rights to collectively bargain, aka unionize. That's important. Employers couldn't apply for pressure or to join or to not join a union or deny a job to a union worker. Of course, that's declared unconstitutional. Controversial program. It does provide jobs and wages. Labor gains abolished child labor. Critics said small businesses did not benefit, that it was only good for large corporations. Some ignored the codes completely, and nothing's really done about it. The case that becomes most popular about this is the Schechter Poultry versus the U.S., aka the case of the stinky chicken. This is the one that basically said they didn't like these codes because it was making them have to limit what chicken they were producing and have to produce better food. Wow, that's horrible. Hate that you guys had to go through that. Long story short, though, the Supreme Court declared that they were right, that some of these codes were unfair and un-American. All right, so some building things. Major industries draw from many sources for jobs to be created, like the PWA, the Public Works Administration. They do power plants, bridges, government office buildings, conservation projects, and schools. One of these is the tunnel, the old Bankhead Tunnel in Mobile that takes you across the bay. HOLC, Homeowner Loan Corporation, saved homes of many Americans by granting a new loan at a low interest and long repayment history. The FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, is still around today. It lent money for repairs or rebuilding defense situations, caused many to be unable to take advantage of this. Transportation, they lowered passenger rates on rails, loans to improve rails, highways, and waterways. Some reforms, we talked about the FDIC. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, must furnish true information about the values of stocks and bonds. The Federal Securities Act is going to establish this. And so this basically monitors the stock market. The TVA is going to build hydroelectric dams in the Tennessee Valley region for flood control, soil conservation, recreational areas, jobs. And of course, but this was done with a private tax. So the rest of the country was paying for the TVA. All right, criticisms. Even though the farm income was raised, consumer expenses are also going to rise. Taxpayers have to make up the subsidy, and so other people are hurting. So basically, you're having to pay more for food, and you're having to pay taxes to help the farmers. That doesn't seem fair either. And so all of these are trade-offs. They're all trade-offs. So let's talk about the Wagner Act. The Wagner Act is known as the Magna Carta of labor. This is going to officially make labor unions legal. There were disputes between the AFL and the CIO going on that lead to strikes. This is difficult to handle. And so the government is going to intervene. The Social Security Administration, this provides unemployment insurance, money that comes from your payroll tax. So you actually pay into that every time you work. Also, old age pension, they help to handicapped and children and wives of injured workers. The Wealth Tax Act is going to seem to punish the wealthy. The Roosevelt second administration in the election of 1936, Roosevelt is the solid choice of the Democrats. He defeats Landon. He had some Republicans support him as well. Labor and Farm also supported him. African Americans love him. They also love Eleanor because she takes a strong side for them. Some critics are going to say he's a dictator. His programs are too socialistic. The national debt is tremendous. The budget was not balanced. Much money and energy was spent on this campaign. Yada, 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 yada. All right. So let's talk about packing the court. Roosevelt felt conservative ideas, All right. So Roosevelt felt that a lot of his ideas are being held back by conservatives on the Supreme Court. So what he does is he writes a bill where he asks Congress to appoint an extra justice for each justice who does not retire at age 70. At this point, the number would be 6. Roosevelt lost the fight, but it caused the court to be more responsive in supporting New Deal programs. What's significant about this is the real only thing they don't support him on. Now the Supreme Court doesn't support him. They eventually chill out, and by the end, they all die, so he gets to replace them anyway. So when you're president for 4 terms, it kind of helps. The gradual decline of the New Deal. The business slump of 37 and 38 is going to cause factory to close, and unemployment is going to rise. And so the size of the debt had caused some alarm. They're going to start to cut back on the New Deal, but what they're going to find is that is not going to be very helpful because problems are going to resurface. Now, talking about the election of 1914. At this point, Hitler has already invaded in Poland. And so during wartime. This is unprecedented. He is going to be he's going to be opposed by Wendell Willkie as the Republican candidate. The threat of big war. Both candidates favored aid to Britain. Both candidates favored staying out of war unless attacked. Roosevelt wins, but his popularity has lessened some because Americans are a little uncomfortable with him serving a fourth term. All right. Until next time, study your history.